When I was a child, like many of you I'm sure, my life was full of routine. I mean, from the time I started school, kindergarten around age 5, I think this is when my earliest memory started to form. My everyday was pretty much set out. Monday through Friday, you'd wake up, go to school, it was the same class, same teacher, same kids, same schedule every day. And then I'd walk home, or to grandma's house really, with my siblings and my cousins every single day. And grandma had her routine as well. Every day she would, when we walked in the door, she would sing these little counting songs and make sure we were all there. And she had this routine, which looking back, I think is kind of funny. Grandma would take us one by one, and she'd sit us on the back step of the house where the sun shined just right, and she would check our hair for little piojos. That's lice if you don't catch my Spanish. And when we were clear to go, then she would, send us on our way. We'd play outside, and eventually she would call us back in, invite us in for a snack or for some dinner as we waited for our parents to get home from work. But every day, it was pretty much the same. I could count on this routine. I knew where I was going. I knew what was going to happen. And even Sunday, Sunday had its routine. We would go to church in the morning. We'd go back to church again at night. And, we'd go back on Wednesdays too, just for good measure. And occasionally we would make a trip to one of my great-grandmother's houses, but I knew we were going to Alba or Corcoran, and we were going to have a Sunday supper. So even that, I always knew where I was going. But every once in a while, my dad would throw us kids for a loop. And then there would be this moment as we were driving, and I'd look out the car window, and I'd start to see things that weren't familiar. And this would make me uneasy. I was an anxious kid, but this would really make me uneasy when I started to notice things that weren't quite the same. I wasn't recognizing these landmarks. And I'd get anxious, and I'd ask my dad, Dad, where are we? Where are we going? What are we doing? And my dad, who, by most accounts, was a pretty good guy, he liked to have a little fun with us sometimes. And I think me, because I was the baby of the family, especially. And so when I'd ask, Dad, where are we going? He would feign this look of horror, like, oh no. And I'd be like, Dad, where are we? And he'd say, we're in the middle of nowhere. I hated that phrase. The middle of nowhere. The middle of nowhere, now that just couldn't be. We had to be somewhere. We had to be going somewhere. I would rather be anywhere else in the world than the middle of nowhere. I would beg my dad, and he knew it got on my nerves. I would beg him, Dad, where are we? Because I just couldn't stand the idea of not knowing where I was and where I was going. And can we relate? Can we relate to that in life? Can we relate to that in church sometimes? Right? Does anyone else like to know where we are, where we're going? Do we sometimes wish we knew all the answers ahead of time? Well, during this season of Lent, as we go through this series of the gifts of the dark wood, a place where Dante described in his Divine Comedy as a place we awaken into, but we shouldn't voluntarily want to go into, we're going to talk about how perhaps we need to shift our perspective a little bit on some of these things that we might think of as curses, things like uncertainty, things like being lost, things like temptation, and a few others along the way. But today, we're going to begin with the gift of uncertainty. On those car rides as a child, what I hadn't yet discovered, something I think my dad had on some level at that point, was that there's a gift in uncertainty. Right? There's a gift in not knowing everything all the time. Not knowing every result or every little detail on the journey ahead of time. There's this gift in letting go of worry about every possible negative outcome. Because the truth is, there are lots of possible outcomes, but no matter what, there's only going to be one outcome. So what are we doing when we lose sleep? When we lose awareness of the present? By worrying about scenarios that honestly we likely won't ever have to encounter? What are we doing in getting caught up in our imagination about all that can go wrong? Because we can lose sight of the idea that maybe, perhaps, things might end up okay. Things might be okay right now in the present. But even more so, we find in these times of uncertainty, we may just discover that God is doing some work that we hadn't prepared ourselves for. We might find that in the darkness, what we have failed to see is that God is drawing us nearer to who we are supposed to be and to what God intends for our own life. So my hope is that during the season of Lent, we can talk about spiritual journeys. That we can talk about the ways that the Holy Spirit works on and through us in ways that we might find uncomfortable. Right? We might find uncomfortable. And that doesn't sound good because honestly, I think if you asked anybody here, you would say it would be easier. It would just be so much easier if the Holy Spirit could speak to us with perfect clarity as we sat in our pew on a Sunday morning. Right? We could say, we got it, we can go now, we're good. Right? Or even more convenient, wouldn't it be great if the Holy Spirit could just speak through our television screen while we sat on our favorite recliner? That would be so nice. I might not see some of you here though, but I'm sure, we would love it if the Holy Spirit would come to us in our most comfortable place. But the truth is that we typically aren't all that attuned to the Holy Spirit in our most comfortable moments. It was written that spiritual awakening comes not in the absence of struggle, but deep in the heart of it. The struggle, the darkness, that is where we can draw on our whole selves to everything that God has created in us and become more awake. There's probably a reason why the most successful apostle spent much of his time in prison. Now, looking back at Paul, you would think he would have burnt out due to all the persecution, due to all the time spent trying to evangelize in hostile territory. We could excuse Paul if he would have said that the struggle was too great and he was giving up. But in those times where Paul was pushed, he felt his conviction grow even deeper. In those moments of struggle and hardship, he found even greater certainty that God was equipping him for what he was called to do. That God was showing him what his life was meant to be, even if it wasn't all made clear in advance. Paul writes, "For now we see in a mirror, dimly." Right, and I think about Paul looking into one of those ancient bronze mirrors, distorted, getting an incomplete image. And he goes on, he says, "But then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known." There's a line in the book, The Gift of the Darkwood, talking about Paul in the scripture, and it says, Paul is stating That a mature faith is one that embraces life as a mystery to be lived, not as a problem to be solved. And that accepts uncertainty as a gift, not a curse. You see, the thing with uncertainty is that is where our trust is developed. And in reality, isn't that what we truly desire? Not certainty, but trust. Because certainty is boring. Right? Certainty is boring. Could you imagine if you knew the end to all your favorite books, all your favorite movies in advance? If you already knew how it was going to end, would you really enjoy it? Right? Sure, knowing the outcome might sound more comfortable, but is it really living? You know, if you knew everything about your spouse from the day you met, some of us might not have ended up with the same spouses, but wouldn't that take out some of the fun? If you knew everything about your child from the moment they were born, oh, wouldn't that take the joy? I mean, isn't that the joy in discovering all these crazy ways your child grows and develops and the way they can outsmart you sometimes, right? If we knew everything about how their life was going to turn out, yes, it would be comfortable, right? We all want the best for our kids, and we all have a picture painted in our heads. Oh, but the fact that they grow on their own, that's where we get joy as parents, right? No, it is much more rewarding to watch and discover things when the outcome is not totally predictable. Sure, when you're kids, you love those movies where you know how it's going to end, but now, as you get older, it's the ones with the twist. Those are the ones that stay with you, that you really, really get something out of. Because it's trust, not certainty. It's trust that we need. And yet trust can only be developed when we let go. When we allow for room for uncertainty. You know, it's like those moments when if you're a parent, when you're working with your kid, teaching them how to ride a bike, right? It's that moment where you have to let go of the back of the seat. It's trust. It's not certainty, right? Because the truth is they might fall. But trust is knowing that if they do fall, when they fall, you're going to be there to pick them up. Right? And trust is that knowing that kids can ride bikes. They get it. Only if you let go. And that can be hard. Right? That can be hard on both parties. Because you want to hold on so bad. And they want to look back and know that you're there. It's that uncertainty, though, that is where we develop our trust. So it is. So it is with uncertainty. That if we're willing to open our eyes in the darkness, we find that we can come to trust in the very presence of God. That we don't have to have everything predetermined for us. To know that God walks alongside of us. So the season of Lent, we are invited to take steps into the wilderness. Not worrying about the need to be rescued immediately. And to be taken out of that darkness, those woods where we can't see necessarily around every corner. Not worrying about needing to be rescued out of it, but to let ourselves awaken to experience the unknown ways of the Holy Spirit. To walk with wonder and to experience the mystery of God. And to truly know the unexpected love of Jesus, even in the most troubling moments of life. Amen.